Hey, everybody. Welcome to Orion Online. We are live at the Orion campus, Kensington Church. Jesse,
Absolutely.
What's going on?
Oh, man, it's been a great week.
There's Sam
It's
Anderson.
A lot of energy. Sam's
you guys,
back
we're in the
town.
lobby today,
So good.
this is where all the tomfoolery happens.
This is where I get distracted.
Sam
but it's all
Anderson.
good. Yeah.
Come say hi.
He's back from Israel.
What's up, man?
How you
guys.
doing?
What's going on?
Just super excited about today.
Yeah.
Did we do the name tag thing?
We
yet?
haven't
Name
yet.
tag thing.
Peeps,
I'm
no
peeps
peeps.
all day. I'm
You-
peeps all day.
And I'm no peeps ever.
You
peeps all
you
day.
probably know
Ever.
all your family at home, so you probably
Yes.
don't have to wear a name tag at home. But
That's probably
whatever.
true. But you can
No, but
still
post
post
it
on
on
Facebook group.
Post it on the feed. Yeah, we want to
Sure.
see if you're peeps
Yeah.
or not.
Yeah.
I have
That's
really
it.
important things to go do.
Okay, go.
All right.
Well,
Yeah.
we've got some important things to tell you about, too. Listen, 2 weeks from today is Easter. Go to kensingtonchurch.org/Easter right now. Get your tickets. We have 2 experiences on Good Friday, 7 between Saturday and
Yeah.
Sunday, Easter weekend. But just
good.
tell them about what's happening with devotional
Yeah.
and discipleship.
Yeah, the 30 Days with Jesus. We have a 30-day devotional that goes in perfect line with the series. And so you have a digital version we don't have anymore in person that you could come pick up. But we have it online on the app that you can go pick up. Or we have an audio version which they've recorded. Different staff members read them, and it's really been awesome to go through. So
That's awesome.
it's been
Yeah,
great.
and hey, last thing I want to say, because we got to get rolling here, is we are doing communion service today. So
Yeah.
get some crackers, get some juice, prep. In the middle of worship, toward the end of Craig's message, we will be taking communion. So join us in that. Anything
it's
else?
exciting.
Dude,
It's
peeps.
been-
Tell them about the peeps.
We did the peeps. Did the peeps, no peeps, post it on the
That's right.
on the Facebook page.
If
So
you have
do that.
some
Yeah.
dry, crusty peeps, the Easter candy that no
Some
one
people
likes.
put stale only,
It's
and
so
I was
true.
like, oh gosh,
Oh my
that's not
gosh.
even a thing. So
Listen, we got to get out of
Yeah.
here because service is about to start.
jump
But
in.
listen, we love you guys. We're so grateful you've tuned in today. If you need anything, let us know. And I'll just say this, from our
Yes.
team to your house, we love you. Thanks for tuning in. Enjoy the broadcast today. We
have a
love you
great day.
guys.
Bye, guys.
In the weak light of early morning, Jesus carried his heavy cross, step by step, toward the hill where he would spend his final hours and take his last breath. He would utter these shocking words, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing," which would reach the ear of a centurion soldier, one whose job was to see him crucified. Those words would change his life forever. That same day, a religious leader, once suspicious and troubled by Jesus, would risk his position to take the body of Jesus. The lifeless body intended for the trash heap would instead be wrapped tenderly with fine linen and placed in a tomb fit for a king. How was this religious leader's heart and mind so completely changed? Mary went to Jesus' tomb with heavy steps and a grief-stricken soul, bringing spices to anoint Jesus' body. She would see the empty tomb, and her heavy feet would become light as she ran to tell the others. That same day, 2 men walked away from the very one they had called Messiah and King. They would journey away from Jerusalem with backs turned on their dashed hopes. They would doubt their king who lay in a tomb and his kingdom that never came to be. But on the road, they would learn that their king was alive again. In a span of just 3 days, everything changed for everyone.
Well, good morning, Kensington. We doing all right? We good? Everybody awake today? Awesome. It's good to see you guys. If you've never been here before, my name is Matthias. I'm the worship pastor around here. And we are actually going to do a new song today. It's a really fun song. It's one that we get to celebrate the resurrection of Jesus and the resurrection that he calls us into. And it's one actually that we're going to do at Easter. And speaking of Easter, what I want you guys to do as we're singing the song as well is kind of have in the back of your mind, who is it? Who in my sphere of people really needs to come to Easter? And who of those people do I really need to invite this year? Okay? Can we all agree to doing that? We're gonna all think of someone who we can invite to Easter this year? Yes? Yes? Raise hands. Everybody's gonna invite somebody to Easter this year, right? Somebody who really needs to know the love of Jesus and how much he cares for them, yes? All right, sounds good. Yes, you are worthy of it all. For from you are all things, and to you are all things. You deserve the glory. Yes, you deserve the glory. You deserve the glory. All of the glory, all of the glory is yours, it's yours. All of the glory, all of the glory is yours, it's yours, it's yours, it's yours. All of the glory, all of the glory is yours, it's yours, it's yours, it's yours. All of the glory, all of the glory is yours, it's yours, it's yours, it's yours. All of the glory, all of the glory is yours, it's yours, it's yours, it's yours. All of the glory, all of the glory is yours, it's yours, it's yours, it's yours. All of the glory, all of the glory is yours, it's yours, it's yours, it's yours. All of the glory, all of the glory is yours, it's yours, it's yours, it's yours. All of the glory, all of the glory is yours, it's yours, it's yours, it's yours. All of the glory, all of the glory is yours, it's yours, it's yours, it's yours. All of the glory, all of the glory is yours, it's yours, it's yours, it's yours. All of the glory, all of the glory. You are worthy of it all. You are worthy of it all. Oh, King Jesus, for from you are all things, and to you are all things. You deserve the glory. Sing, you are worthy of it all. Oh, lift your voice. Say it. Pour from you, oh, into you, oh, you deserve.
I guess your voice got better. He didn't sing first service because his voice wasn't working. Something changed. Hey, welcome back from spring break, everybody. Wow. Hey, really quick, you know that when we sing and have moments of worship, like you don't have to stand all the time. And I love that we invite, like, hey, stand. There are moments that it's appropriate to get on your feet when you're singing about the magnitude and the glory of Jesus, but it's also appropriate sometimes you sit. That, for whatever reason, that's a song that I have the hardest time standing in the middle of. Like when you're singing, God, you're worthy of it all. And it puts, for me, my heart and my mind in this awareness of just the greatness of God. Like I have a hard time. If I actually did what my body felt compelled to do in that moment, I'd actually lay flat on the ground. Probably weird some of you out, so I just sit instead. But it's appropriate at times to stand. It's appropriate to sit. It's appropriate to lay. It's appropriate to just respond how you feel compelled to respond in the moments that we're singing about the greatness of God. Maybe for some of you at the place you're at in your journey, you're trying to figure out if there even is a God, if Jesus is him. Maybe what's appropriate for you is just to sit and ponder. And you're like, I'm not going to sing, but I will wonder. I will question. So I just always want you to know that as we invite, like that's not a mandate. It's not like you got to stand when you sing. That's not like a thing. You don't find that as a chapter and a verse in the Bible. But it's a way to say we're going to respond viscerally to what we're saying verbally. I hope you know too, like those words, he's worthy of it all. We can misunderstand that sometimes and think that just means like you're worthy of us singing to you about how great you are. But one of the things I was reminded of this morning when we were singing those words, you're worthy of it all, is it means all. So you know what he's also worthy of is not just the moment for me to sing how great he is. He's also worthy of me giving to him my fears. He's worthy of me handing over my disappointments. He's worthy of me handing over the places I don't know how to share with anybody else in my head and heart. He's worthy of my fears. He's worthy of it all. My hope is at some point throughout this morning is that you'll feel a sense of God inviting you into that place, that trustworthy place, that his hands are worthy to take everything from you, including you, and you can trust him with it. So here's what we're gonna do for a minute before we go into the rest of the morning is we're gonna watch a short video that is a compilation of all of the campuses from last Sunday. And here's why. For those of you that missed it, last week we were introduced to our senior pastor candidate, Craig Springer, and his wife, Sarah. For those of you that don't know, for the last couple of years, we have been in a search to find a replacement for our founder, Steve Andrews. Not replacement, I mean, nobody's replacing Steve, he's Steve, but to find somebody to step in and fill those shoes. Somebody that has the same heart that Steve had that birthed this entire thing called Kensington, which was a heart to reach the one. Those of us who find ourselves in our lives at different places and points far from Jesus, this church started for those people. We've all been those people. And so we wanted to find somebody in the last couple of years that would step into that role. And so we had a search firm that 6 months ago, we really pressed heavy into the paint to try and find this person by partnering up with a group called Vanderbloemen. They went through about 60 candidates, narrowed that down to 7, presented those over to our elders. Our elders narrowed that down to 3. And there was a process of several of us meeting those 3 that then narrowed it down to Craig, to the one that we are presenting to you as the candidate for the next position of senior pastor of Kensington. Now, before we watched last week, a couple things I want you to know. Number one, some of you might be thinking, that's really great. Like, you're excited. I've heard from some of you. Others of you, you might be thinking, are we like overhyping like one person joining a team of already a lot of people from staff to volunteers and an amazing community of get-her-doners, and it's just one person? Yes. However, I like to think of Kensington because it's such an interesting beast being a multiple campus church like we are. We got 6 different campuses and locations all over Metro Detroit, and then one up north in Traverse City. Because of that, we're a lot like the, I keep forgetting the horses' name. What are the Budweiser horses? Thank you, Clydesdales. They'll forever be the Budweiser horses, whatever. The Clydesdales. Like, every campus is kind of like a Clydesdale. Like, those are big, powerful, strong horses that could very easily run off in their own directions if you don't have somebody saying, no, this is the direction, this is the vision, this is the mission, let's run in unity. And so really what this position is, Craig is stepping into a role in many ways to be that thread between the campuses, to really put his arms around those Clydesdales and say, this direction, let's head for this hill and let's do it together. So is he just one of a group of already amazing people? Absolutely. But he's stepping in to an incredible position and a really important strategic one for us. So one of the things I want you to hear right now is all the different campus leaders sharing from last week, kind of their thoughts and their feelings about Craig, having met him, having been involved in the process. Because one of the things that can happen very easily when you're multiple campuses like us is to forget that we're a part of something bigger. It's not just Orion. It's not just Clarkston. It's not just Traverse City. It's not just Birmingham. It's not just Clinton Township. It's not just Troy. It's all of us together. And this is one of those unique moments where I think we are reminded that we're a part of something bigger than any one campus. And so to see the unity that is really growing in excitement and hopefulness across our campuses and our campus leaders, for me is a very encouraging moment to see what God is up to as he brings Craig and Sarah to explore being that next lead pastor for Kensington. So here's all of our campuses and our campus leaders sharing their thoughts.
One of the things that I realized about Craig is that one of probably his greatest talents is his fashion sense, because at the first service, my kids were there and they were saying to me over and over again, Dad, you dress like Mr. Springer. You guys are dressed exactly alike. And so, hey, you know what? We're like twins today. And so he's already leading me. He's already elevated me in that sense, whereas Steve brought me down, and then Craig is actually bringing me up today. But hey, this is one of the things that I love about God is that he brings people together. He brings stories together. People that we didn't even know, communities that we didn't even know about. And he just brings us together and hearts align, and it's so extraordinarily beautiful. And as Craig talked about, and as they were talking about up here, one of the core aspects of who we are as Kensington is that we have always been, in 30 plus years, we have always been about the one who is far from Jesus, and doing whatever we can to move after and pursue that person. And when you hear Craig and Sarah's story, that is what they have been about as well.
And one of the things I've really valued about Craig is watching him be a learner. He is really genuinely stepping in right now going, I want to learn. I want to learn Kensington. I want to learn you. I want to learn the staff. It'd be very easy in a high profile position like this for him to just step in and go, I'm going to tell you everything. Here's the hill we're going to take, and here's what we're going to do, and everybody fall in line and rah, rah, rah. And instead there's this quiet pause that he's just going, I really genuinely want to learn.
The things that he knew about me and how long I'd been here, what my history was, just showed the depth of his level to want to get to know people, to want to understand where they are in order, I think, to help lead well for this next step in the church. So from me, from the lead pastor of Kensington, Clinton Township, I can't tell you how excited I am to run with this person, to run with Craig and on mission for the next things that God has laid up in store for this church.
I didn't want an organizational guru. I didn't want somebody that just knew how to navigate large organizations or large churches. I wanted somebody who had a heart to follow Jesus. And so to see Craig and to hear his heart and to hear him talk about evangelism, and I mean, it's inspiring to me.
And it was amazing just to stop and hear the heartbeat of Craig and his wife, Sarah. In their burn, I mean, a genuine, authentic burn to see the one, to see somebody actually that doesn't know Jesus be reached by Jesus, to see our campuses become so in love with Jesus that we realize how loved we are, how much Jesus Christ cares about us, how radically he changes us and transforms us, all to go out and reach more. And that part was just, to me, incredible. And so I want you to know my heart.
Like, I just felt like it was this answered prayer that we had been hoping for, desiring, and going, God, where are you going to lead us? And how are you going to find this person that would fit not just Kensington's past, but care for it as we move into the future?
All right, hold on, I got to ask a question. First service, somebody whistled too. Who whistled? So he was like, are you happy or you think he's good looking? I'm just curious, because I think both. Or is it the name? Because it could be the name too. So, all right, so I'm excited. I'm with you. Let's all whistle. There you go, I'm with you. I'm excited. You didn't have to whistle. That was weird. So a couple ways that you're going to be able to meet Craig a little bit more and just be a part of this process. One is this Wednesday for our regularly scheduled midweek. We're actually pausing on midweek, and there's going to be a meet and greet with Craig and Sarah right here in this room. And so I would encourage you to come from 7 to 8. We're going to be in here, just a time to have some fun. We're teaming up with Clarkston, so Clarkston's going to be with us. Jeremiah and I will be on stage, spending some time with Craig, just helping him get to know us as a community, and you getting to know him and Sarah and their family, hearing his heart, hearing some of his thoughts, even some of his vision and hopes for Kensington, and then asking questions. So we're going to have an opportunity for you to text in questions that night live. Obviously, depending on how many people are there, we're not going to be able to get through everyone, but we're going to do our darndest to make sure to answer as many questions as possible. We have reserved a big chunk of the time that we'll be together just for that. Somebody did ask me, is it really a meet and greet, or are we just going to hear from him on the stage? Both. So afterwards, when we're done in here, we're going to move out into the lobby. There's going to be dessert and a time really just to hang out and actually interact with him face-to-face and in person and talk with him and hear from him. And I think you'll begin to appreciate him as the rest of us have. In addition to that, on the 10th, so next Sunday, we are going to have a campus-wide congregational member vote for the Springers to be affirmed and for Craig in his position to be affirmed. So that's a big moment for us. It has never happened in the history of Kensington to have a baton passed from our founder to a new lead pastor. So even if you just came to watch that moment, you're like, I don't care about voting. Like, come, be a part of that vote, be a part of that moment. It's just a great moment for us to celebrate, I think, what God is doing and how he's continuing to be faithful to lead us as a community into the future. So, all right, so we have got week 2 of a series we started 3 weeks ago. Last week we paused because we had a chance to meet Craig and Sarah, but we're in a series called The 12 Hours. And it's an attempt to walk through the last 12 hours of Jesus' life as he moves his way towards the cross. And when Sam Anderson started the series for us 3 weeks ago, he left us off with Jesus having been arrested. And so today we're going to pick up with his trial when it begins. And the trial is going to go through several iterations. There's going to be multiple judges. There's going to be different accusers. There's going to be all kinds of layers to this thing. But this at the start is where he's going to come face to face, Jesus, with a group called the Sanhedrin. And this is a point in the whole journey where I think you will see the clash of two very different kingdoms. The kingdom of God, and another kingdom that we'll refer to throughout this morning as the kingdom of religion. So I'm gonna pray in just a minute and get us started. Before we do, I wanna ask that we could take up our offering today. And here's what I'll quickly say about the offering. I think these are cool moments for us. Because I've said this and I'll always say it, this is not for us a moment about money. It's about two real things. It is about trust. I mean, this is a worthy of it all kind of moment where we're saying, hey, you're worthy of all of it that I have. But it's also a moment of mission. Like, this is where we really say we believe that God has given us a mission, not just drawn us into his affection, but he's given us the mission to take that affection to the entire globe. There's, like, literally right now is a really cool way that that's even happening, that you're a part of making happen. So the guy that leads our global department, Jay Lucarelli, he's in Kenya right now with our global partner there, but he's also with Clint Dupin, that some of you may remember, who used to lead our Birmingham campus. He left to go launch a church that we helped him start in California. So he's right now with Jay. Jay's leading them on a trip in Kenya with some of our global partners with a church that we started. So the whole thing's just incredible. Like, all of that, literally, from Clint being able to plant a church to now being a part of what we're doing with Kenya to Kenya and the partnership there, it is all happening as a result of moments like this and your generosity. So if you're a part of that, as always, thank you. If you're not, I'll just tell you honestly, I don't think there's too many better things you can do with your money. If you don't think so here, then do it somewhere else where the kingdom is being advanced, but do it and be a part of these moments. All right, I'm gonna pray, and then we're gonna dive in because we got a little bit of work to do today. So here we go. Father in heaven, I do just wanna give attention to the fact that I wanna live in the space and in the thought that you are worthy of it all today. Regardless of whatever else I say, regardless of whatever else we hear from you, I want to live in the space that is mindful of the fact that you are worthy of it all. And so you who are worthy of it all, for the next little bit of time, we place ourselves in your hands. And I ask that you would be present to us, that you'd speak to us, that you'd be clear to us, that whether we're sitting here eager and ready to open up the Bible and love to spend time in the scriptures, or if we're sitting here skeptical that this book has any meaning, skeptical that you exist, somehow would you transcend through all of that and do what I can't do what no person can do, and just reveal yourself in personal ways and clear ways, and help us, I pray, to understand a better, clear, more accurate picture of who you are, Jesus, by the time we walk out of here today. In your name we pray, amen. So quick question. Can y'all think of a time that you don't have to show a hand, just think of it, a time you were misrepresented by someone else? Maybe it was intentional, maybe it was accidental, maybe it was a big misrepresentation, maybe it was a little thing, but just think about it, a time that somebody else on your behalf completely misrepresented you. So for me, one of the times I think of is years ago, I used to work for a guy who, long story short, but he was one of those kind of leaders that was intimidated by other leaders. And so he had a tendency to do one of two things. He would either eventually get rid of you, and eventually was usually pretty quickly, or he'd draw you in to become his best buddy. So any other strong leader around him, that's kind of how he responded to it. And so I was not the get drawn in to become his best buddy kind of leader. So there was a period of time where I started to feel some resistance between the two of us. It was also the same time that I started talking to a church planting organization that was talking about launching us and helping me start a church that I ended up starting. And along the way, I started getting hints that this guy that I worked for at the time was bad-mouthing me to other people. Like, I'd hear things like, hey, so-and-so said that he said about you. And I was like, really? So I'd go back to him, I'm like, hey, I heard that you said, I just want to clear the air if there's something there, or put down the rumor. He's like, no. I'm like, oh, okay. And then it happened like 2 or 3 more times. So I went to him again. I was like, it's kind of weird. I keep hearing that you keep saying, so this is a really weird rumor. He's like, no, No, not at all. I'm like, okay. So then in this like completely bizarre event, I go to the office where he and I share an office right next door to each other, and I go to pick up a bunch of books one day that are mine, and somehow a bunch of his books got mixed in with my books. So I'm walking out in the parking lot, I got a stack of books in my arm, and I drop one. And I kid you not, out falls in the parking lot a handwritten note by him, because it was signed by him. So that's how I knew it was by him. And it was addressed to this other guy that I'd been getting word he'd been bad-mouthing me to. And so I'm like, you've got to be. Now listen, there are totally things like you, there are things that you could criticize me for, then and now. Things that I need to grow up in, things I need to do better in, things I need to mature in. He didn't mention any of those. Like, he just created a version of me that was not even real and just tore me down. I think he was partly intimidated that this other group wanted to work with me, and he was trying to keep face about why he didn't want to launch us as a church, blah, blah, blah. In the end, I grabbed the note. After a couple weeks of trying to think, what do I do with this? I called him up. I said, hey, can we go get breakfast? So he's like, yeah, let's get breakfast. I'm like, all right, Pancake House. So we meet at Pancake House. I sit down, and I just looked at him. I go, hey, listen, I'm not good with like small talk, so I'm going to get right to the point. And I put the note on the table, and I slid it across. And I go, can you explain that? And he goes, and then he literally looks at me and he goes, can I go use the bathroom? I was like, looks like you just did in your pants. I did not say that. I totally thought it though. I wish I would have now looking back. But that was a moment where here's this guy like completely misrepresenting who I am. Now, I'm gonna make an assumption about you. My assumption is that you're tuning in this morning or you're in this room right now, wherever you would describe yourself on the religious journey, you are in this room and watching because in some part, you want a clear image of who God is. You want a picture of who he is and what he's like, and if what he's like has any implication on you, what you are like, what you should be like. The problem is, it's really confusing to figure out how to take the being who created all things in all of his magnitude, his massiveness, his glory, his weight, his significance, and put it into a framework that we can get our arms around, our mind around, our heart around. If we're honest, there's even places in the Bible that are really confusing that are an attempt to explain God. But like, for example, listen to one of them. Hebrews chapter 11. Actually, chapter 12. But you have come to a mountain, the mountain of Zion, to the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem, and you have come to 1,000 upon 1,000 of angels in joyful assembly, to the church of the firstborn whose names are written in heaven. And you have come to God, the judge of all, to the spirits of the righteous made perfect, to Jesus, the mediator of the new covenant, and to sprinkled with blood that speaks a better word than the word of Abel. See to it that you do not refuse him who speaks. If they did not escape when they refused him who warned them on earth, how much less if we turn from him who warns us in heaven? At this time a voice shook the earth, but now he has promised once more, I will shake not only the earth, but also the heavens. The word once more indicates the moving of what can be shaken so that the created things, what cannot be shaken, may remain. Therefore, since we are receiving a kingdom that cannot be shaken, let us be thankful and so thank God and acceptably with reverence and awe, for our God is a consuming fire. So that clears it up, right? What's God like? Well, he's like a mountain. He's like sprinkled blood. There's thousands of angels and fire. There you go. That's God. Like, how do you get your hands around that? Like, how do you create a framework to understand a giant mountain and consuming fire? I mean, what do you do with fire usually? You don't wrap your arms around it. You run away from it. You don't touch it at least. Like, he says, I'm a consuming fire. I'm a mountain. I'm sprinkled blood. Like, how do we create a framework to properly understand what God is like? So here's what we do. We tend to put into that framework other people and other ideas in an attempt to help us understand God, what he's like and who he is. So for me, sometimes that framework has been my dad. Like, I see God as my dad, not like see him as my dad, but like make him my actual dad, which some parts of that are great and some parts aren't. Or sometimes I've made him the expectations other people have on me, or sometimes I view him as a brother, and there's parts of that are accurate and some parts that can be inaccurate. Sometimes I view him as a judge, but there's all these different ways and ideas and even other people that we tend to insert into this framework that we call God in an attempt to understand who he is and what he's like. And I would assume you probably do the same. I would assume that for all of us, there's a little bit of a challenge at times to figure out how do we properly frame God so that we understand who he is and how we understand what he's like. I mean, I think that's in part why in the United States, there's 200 different denominations. Globally, it's estimated that there are 45,000 different denominations. Why? Because there's a lot of different ideas on what God is like. his image, his nature, and what version of him to frame up so that we properly understand God. And yet in the scriptures, I think God gives us a clear indication of how to frame him, how to understand him. Matter of fact, the book of Hebrews, this is what he tells us in terms of how to frame God. Hebrews chapter 1, verse 3 says, the Son, who's the Son? It's Jesus. The Son is the radiance of God's glory, and say the next two words, just say them. Not the partial representation, not the mostly representation, not the kind of representation. Jesus is the exact representation of his being, sustaining all things by his powerful word. After he had provided purification for sins, now he's going to do what justifies that he is in fact God fully. He sat down at the right hand of the majesty in heaven. He's sitting on the throne, ruling all. Like the framework to understand God is Jesus. He is not just like him, he is him. Now, that doesn't give us everything to understand about who God is, but it gives us a framework to be able to wrap our hands and our hearts and our minds around. And some of you might go, this is like Christianity 101. And some of you, maybe it's a new concept, or maybe it's a concept you're wrestling with, that Jesus is in fact God. He is the appropriate, proper framework in understanding who God is and what God's like. But I think one of the clearest ways, and this is where we're going to go this morning, Matthew 26, if you have a Bible, I think one of the clearest pictures of seeing what God is like in the person of Jesus occurs at the start of his trial, when he finds himself standing before a judging, ruling authority called the Sanhedrin. So here's what's interesting, and then we're going to read the text. So Matthew 26, if you've got your Bibles, if not, it's going to be on the screen, but we're going to go to verse 57 in chapter 26 in a minute. This is where you're going to see the kingdom of God. So when you think kingdom, I want you to think attitude, attributes, actions, reactions, thoughts, expressions. So the kingdom of God is going to come in collision with an entirely different kingdom. And here's the irony. The kingdom that Jesus will come in confrontation with is a kingdom that has been created to actually represent and frame God, and yet horribly misses him. A kingdom that still functions and operates today. And for our purposes this morning, we're going to refer to it as the kingdom of religion. So here we go. Matthew 26, verse 57. Those who had arrested Jesus took him to Caiaphas, a high priest, where the teachers of the law and the elders had assembled. But Peter followed him at a distance, right up to the courtyard of the high priest. And he entered and he sat down with the guards to see the outcome. Now remember, this is the Peter who just moments earlier at the arrest got all big and bold and sliced off the ear of a soldier. And now in the face of these religious leaders and judges, he's doing very much the opposite. Take note of that because we're going to come back to it. Verse 59. The chief priests and the whole Sanhedrin were looking for false evidence against Jesus so that they could put him to death. But they found none, though many false witnesses came forward. Finally, two came forward and declared, this fellow said, I am able to destroy the temple of God and rebuild it in 3 days. So he did say that, but he was referring to himself. And the 3 days after he would die, he'd resurrect. But they thought he meant the actual physical temple, the religious gathering place. Big no-no if he was threatening that. So again, misrepresentation in this moment as well as the entire trial. Verse 62, then the high priest stood up and said to Jesus, are you not going to answer? What is this testimony that these men are bringing against you? Jesus remained silent. And the high priest said to him, I charge you under oath by the living God to tell us if you are the Messiah, the Son of God. You have said so, Jesus replied. But I say to all of you, from now on you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One and coming on the clouds of heaven. And then the high priest tore his clothes and said, he has spoken blasphemy. Why do we need any more witnesses? Look, now you have heard the blasphemy. What do you think? He is worthy of death, they answered. And then they spit on his face, and they struck him with their fists, and others slapped him, and they said to him, prophesy, Messiah, who hit you? So there's a lot of different layers to the trial that will unfold very quickly. But this group that he stands in front of at the start of the whole trial, the Sanhedrin, is the group that set themselves up the most as the enemies of Jesus. Now, the Sanhedrin has a couple of layers to it itself. There is what's called the Great Sanhedrin and then the Lesser Sanhedrin. The Lesser Sanhedrin is a group that's been established of 23 men, elders in every city in Israel to rule over and decide on cases within that city, issues related to religion and law, which for this group of people, the Sanhedrin, religion was law. But then you have the Great Sanhedrin. And the Great Sanhedrin, it wasn't multiple. There was one group. It was 71 judges that they kind of operated more like our Supreme Court. So they were over the lesser courts, and they would try cases that first started at the smaller or the lesser Sanhedrin. So the group that Jesus is in front of right now is the Great Sanhedrin. This is the 71. And they've completely bypassed the lower courts and just rushed him right up to the Supreme Court with one goal in mind. They've already made it up. They said they're trying to get him to death. The verdict is already established in their heads. So not only have they violated the process going from the lesser courts and bypassing right to the big court, along the way, they're going to violate 9 different ways that they are supposed to operate, which makes this whole proceeding entirely illegal from the start. Nonetheless, here's Jesus, illegal or not, in front of 71 angry, minds already made up, ready to pass verdict men, religious judges. And here's their message to Jesus. You have been weighed, you have been measured, and you have been found wanting. And that is the message of religion. 2001, there was a movie that came out. Some of you may have seen it. I think it's one of the most underrated movies ever. It is my top #1 movie. A Knight's Tale with Heath Ledger. Any fans? Okay, the 4 of us can get together sometime and watch it. It's good. The rest of you, come on, man. So I'm gonna give you the quick run through of it. I love this movie. You maybe even heard me talk about it before. So here's the essence of the movie. It's set in medieval times. There's knights and there's peasants, and Heath Ledger shows up. His name's William. He's a peasant. Dad sells him off to a knight for hopes of a better life, and midway through the movie, all he's doing is serving this knight, and he's a nobody, and he's a nothing. Well, midway through a jousting tournament, the knight that he's serving ends up dying. So Heath Ledger and his comrades are like, well, we're gonna starve to death. We need food. That was gonna be the money for, so he puts on the armor. He pretends, because nobody can see who he really is, that he's the knight. He goes and jousts. He not only wins, but realizes, I'm actually pretty good at this. So then he decides, let's fake it. Let's just start jousting and I'll be the knight. So he creates this whole fake identity, Sir Lichten von Liechtenstein, I think. And so it's like a mouthful. So he creates this fake identity, gets papers drawn up and everything. He starts competing in all these tournaments, and he's good, and he's winning them all. Well, there's a real knight who he keeps beating and can't win against him, who he actually starts to sniff out that something's not right with this guy. So he does his homework and research and finds out this von Liechtenstein guy is a fake. He's actually a fraud. He's not a real knight. So he goes to the king and he goes to the authorities in the town and he tells them the real deal. So they arrest him. And there's this moment in the movie where Heath Ledger's character, he's in the stockades, he's in prison, he's on his knees, and the villain comes in and he whispers in his ear, you have been weighed, you have been measured, and you have been found wanting. And then he punches him and he walks out. Well, what begins to happen after that is that Ledger's friends love the guy so much that they'd give their life for him like any other knight. And so they go to the king on his behalf. The king notices all this and he's like, listen, knight or not, you have knight qualities. So the king of England actually ends up knighting him. So then he goes on, he competes, but before he competes in the final battle with the arch villain, he's actually able to call out his real name. So I love this part. This is my favorite part in the movie. He gets out there because every other time he's been introduced as this von Liechtenstein guy. So now under his real identity, because the king has knighted him, he shouts out before he charges in for the last run, William! And then he obliterates the guy. He's on the ground. He looks down at him. He's like, you have been weighed. You have been measured. You have been found wanting. We've got a guy on staff. His name's Will. Every time I see Will, I just want to shout out. I'm like, I have to bite my finger. Oh. He's like, hey, Craig. I'm like, hey, William! So that's the whole movie. You're like, why did you tell us that whole movie? Because this is that moment for Jesus, where he stands in front of this judging board of religious leaders who weigh him, who measure him, and who tell him, you're wanting. What they end up telling him is, you have deviated so far from our idea of what a follower of God looks like, let alone deviated from what God himself would look like, that there's only one conclusion and one appropriate response, and it is to kill you. And they do. That's what religion did. And that's what religion still does. religion kills the image of God far more than it represents it. And in case you think I'm being harsh on the Pharisees and the religious leaders and the Sanhedrin and all the rest that make up this group, Matthew chapter 23, this is Jesus' assessment of their efforts and their discipleship training process. Verse 15 of chapter 23 of Matthew. Woe to you, you teachers of the law, and you Pharisees, you hypocrites. You travel over land and sea to win a single convert. And when you have succeeded, you make them twice as much a child of hell as you are. Like we've got somebody here on staff. Her name is Shar Kelly. She's amazing. She oversees what we call our discipleship process. It is the process and steps to try and help us grow closer to who Jesus is and more like him. Could you imagine a scenario where I sit down with, hey, Shar, let's have a meeting. So I've been looking at the people going through your process. And it appears to me that when you actually finish the training with people, they've become twice the sons of hell that you are. Like, this is not a positive moment that Jesus is passing on to his religious leaders. This is like fighting words kind of moment. So for me, one of the first times in my life that I ever felt this moment of being weighed and measured and not making the cut was actually in baseball. I think I was right around junior high or maybe just shy by a year. This was back when, everybody didn't get a trophy and everybody didn't make the team. And so I had to go out for a team, and I actually making the cut for the team was a big deal. My dad, huge Tigers fan, loves the Detroit Tigers. One of the teams was the Detroit Tigers. I'm gonna try for the Tigers. I actually made the Detroit Tigers team. So I get on the team. My dad celebrated. We all went out to eat. When you're one of 7 kids, you don't go out to eat very often. So this is a really big night. We go have food, we celebrate. Well, within the first 2 to 3 games, I got cut. And I got cut because I was out in the field. They stuck me in right field. Nothing ever happens in right field when you're that age. So I'm in right field, bored out of my mind every game. And so this one particular day, I had a mitt that was 3 times too big for me. I kept putting it up to my face, and I was pretending like I was a robot or something. I was and sure enough, some kid pops, right? And I can hear him, McGlasson! I'm oh. So that day, my coach comes up to me. He's like, you're cut. We're trading you to the Dodgers. I'm like, the Dodgers. So I totally didn't make the cut. But that, for me, began as a moment in my story of a message that has been reinforced so many times over by different people in different places. A message just like these judges. You have been measured. You have been weighed. You have been found wanting. If you put the kingdom of religion and the kingdom of Jesus side by side, they look very different. The message of the kingdom of religion, if you will, is be better, do better, try harder. And the aim is to go higher. Do better so you can go higher. The problem is all that creates is pride, arrogance, and self-righteousness. And the method to get you there is shame, fear, condemnation, guilt. We're over here, the message of the kingdom of Jesus is not be better, it's be forgiven. The aim is not go higher, it's go lower. It's embrace humility. It's woven all throughout the scriptures, and particularly the Gospels. Maybe one of the best is when Jesus once said, the greatest must be the least. And the method, the attempt to get you there, is love, grace, mercy, forgiveness, restoration. Those are 2 entirely different kingdoms. The problem with the kingdom of religion is not just that it horribly misrepresents who God is, but that it also puts us into a posture of judging one another, and then we hide from one another. Because under the kingdom of religion's laws, I can't bring my full self to bear. If you know fill in the blank about me, I could potentially get cut. Because the kingdom of religion is constantly about weighing, measuring, and you don't make it. You have been found wanting. And so what we have a tendency to do under the kingdom of religion is be in cultures where we kind of hide from one another. Which again, I want to go back to Matthew. I told you to take note of this, but this is what Peter's doing. Verse 57, one more time. Those who had arrested Jesus took him to Caiaphas, the high priest, where the teachers of the law and the elders had assembled. But Peter followed at what? A distance. Yeah. He's keeping himself back. Why? Because religion always makes you hide. It makes you keep yourself pulled back. You might go, well, he's pulled back because they're going to kill Jesus and he doesn't want to get killed too. Exactly. That's what religion does. It creates an environment of fear because you don't make the cut, so you have to stay pulled back because otherwise you are found wanting. And that's exactly what Peter's doing. And it's exactly why I think so many of us have experienced church circles that feel frankly phony. So often the comment about other communities, or maybe you've even felt it sometimes here, is that church people can be phony, which is why on the opposite side, one of the greatest values I constantly hear espoused in this place and from so many of you is authenticity. It's just being really who you are, bringing your full self to bear. Why? Because many of us have come face to face with the phoniness of church environments. Why is there phoniness? Because in religious environments, we're made to fear, so we hide and pull ourselves back. Can you imagine, though, a culture that's the opposite of that? One where you can literally bring your full self with no reservation, no fear, no phoniness to bear. Like suppose you walk into a church and there's somebody new and you walk up and you're like, hey, my name's Bob, who are you? And this is what Bob says, or let's call him Scott. He says, hey, by the way, if there's any Scotts in the room, this is not pointed at you. He's like, hey, my name's Scott. Hey, by the way, as we're getting started in this friendship, I know that I look together on the outside, but secretly, just want you to be aware, I'm kind of overcompensating on the inside for some deep insecurities, most of which were born out of my childhood where I was kind of an outsider, even in my own family. So what I do at work is I kind of overcompensate and I get my peers respect by being confident and competent, but truly most days I feel like I'm wasting away a little bit inside. But I take care of those emotions and feelings with a little bit of pornography and booze. So what was your name? And maybe some of you are like, no, dude, that'd be way too much realism for me. My name's See You Later. But what if that's actually part of what the kingdom of Jesus is attempting to create? Is a place so real and so authentic that there's no need to hide. A place of love, grace, mercy, forgiveness, and restoration. Matter of fact, do me this favor. Would you just look at somebody next to you? Go ahead, look at them. If they came with you, you know them. If they didn't and you're single, maybe you're looking for a number, but just look at them, doesn't matter. They look pretty together, don't they? Like this is a room of pretty together looking people. All right, keep looking at them, keep looking. Like, I don't know this person, it's awkward. I deal with it. All right, okay, now listen. That person who looks pretty together, I guarantee this. They have thought, they have said, and they have done things that would shock you and appall you. You have, and I have. We all have. And yet, one of our deepest desires is to be able to exist in a place where we can bring our full self to bear. The best parts and the worst parts, and to know that the message will not be, you have been weighed, you have been measured, and you have been found wanting. What if we could hear God say, Jesus is not religion. And Jesus created an entirely different kingdom. One whose foundation is not built upon judgment of one another. One who is intended to be a community where no one walks alone, where there's no need for pretense or hiding, where there is, in fact, authentic, genuine love, embracing one another, even forgiveness and restoration when necessary. I want to give you one more position that looks very similar in some ways to what Jesus found himself in, but ends very differently in John chapter 21. So this is the other side of the resurrection. When Jesus has been alive now, he's come back from the grave. He has been seen by his disciples. They know he's alive. There's even a moment where we're told in an account that he shows up in a room and then walks through a wall. Like if you needed any more evidence that Jesus was actually who he said, there it is, that's the moment. Peter has been among that group, Peter being one of the disciples. Again, this is the Peter who was just hiding. So he's seen that, he knows this. So we find ourselves in this moment post the resurrection where Jesus comes back together with his disciples. And yet there's this moment where now he stands in a position that really could have been the position of the judge. because Peter, we know, betrayed him. It goes on after his hiding. Peter goes even further from hiding. He's directly questioned, do you know him? Are you one of his? He's like, nope, don't know the guy. Like completely sticks him in the back, betrays him, walks out on him. And so there's this moment where you genuinely have offense and offender. And yet Jesus, though he stands potentially in the position like the religious judges, could have condemned and passed sentence, has an entirely different interaction with Peter than was had with him by the religious leaders. So John chapter 21. After Jesus had appeared again to his disciples by the Sea of Galilee, it happened this way. Simon Peter, Thomas, also known as Didymus, Nathanael from Canaan in Galilee, and the sons of Zebedee, and 2 other disciples were together. I'm going to fish, Peter said. Well, we'll go with you. And so they went out and they got in their boat, but that night they caught nothing. Early in the morning, Jesus stood on the shore, but the disciples did not recognize him. And he called out to them, friends, have you caught any fish? No, they answered. And so he said to them, throw out your net on the right side of the boat and you will find some. And when they did, they were unable to pull on the net because of the large number. And then the disciple, whom Jesus loved, said to Peter, it's the Lord. And as soon as Simon Peter heard it's the Lord, he wrapped his outer garment around him, for he had taken it off, and he jumped into the water. Now, position that move with what we saw when he was in face-to-face contact with the religious leaders. What did he do in the presence of religion? He hid. What does he do in the presence of Jesus, even knowing he betrayed him and was guilty, but he knew something more about who Jesus was? What does he do? He runs to him. Like, I don't know what the rest of the disciples are thinking in the boat. They're like, dude, calm down. We're right here. Like, just row with us. We'll be there in 5 minutes. And Peter's like, nope. And then he puts his clothes on, which doesn't make any sense. He's just discombobulated. He's like, I'm in. And he swims, and he's the first one at the shore. Here's one of the things to note. Religion makes God judgmental. Jesus made God accessible. And so Peter finds himself pursuing Jesus, even with all of his shame, all of his regret, and all of his mistake. He runs to him and not away from him. But he has to run to him because he's out fishing. This is what's interesting to me. There's a lot of theories on why Peter's out fishing. The one that I think makes a lot of sense is that potentially what's happening here, because Peter's already seen Jesus risen from the dead, he knows he's alive, is that Peter's going back to what he knows. He is a fisherman. This is what he's done. This is who he's been. There's a possibility that maybe Peter weighed himself, measured himself, and found himself wanting. And so maybe he cut himself from the team. But then Jesus is there. And the draw of Jesus pulls him back. And so they sit down and they have this meal. But then after the meal, Jesus has a very pointed conversation with Peter that goes this way. Verse 15, when they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Yes, Lord, he said. You know that I love you. And Jesus said, then feed my lambs. Again, Jesus said, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And he answered, yes, Lord, you know I love you. And Jesus said, then take care of my sheep. The third time he said to him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him a third time, do you love me? And he said, Lord, you know all things, and you know that I love you. And then Jesus said, then feed my sheep. What I love about this, several things, but one of the things is that in this moment that could have been a moment of confrontation, of Jesus replicating the kingdom of religion, passing down sentence and judgment, instead, it's not a moment of judgment, it's a moment of restoration. It's a moment of forgiveness. It's a moment of embrace. This is a moment where Jesus shows a very different kingdom than the kingdom of religion. This is the kingdom of God. It says, bring all you have to bear to me, and I will wrap my arms around it. And here's the amazing thing. He doesn't just refuse to pass judgment on Peter. He goes even farther. He ends up, before this is all done, literally laying the mantle of what would become the movement that birthed the church into the hands of Peter. Peter, the betrayer, the one who, at least if he didn't pass judgment on him, it would be justifiable for him to say, you're like tier 3 of the disciples now. And instead, he says, love me? Okay, then feed my sheep, feed my lambs, feed my sheep. In other words, he says, take care of my church, birth my kingdom. After I'm gone, continue to do what I've done. And he puts it on him. Like, can you imagine the power of this moment? Not just for Peter, but even for the watching disciples, who would have expected a very different interaction in that moment had it been a religious interaction. And can you imagine the power, not just for them as the rest of the disciples, to realize I can bring my full self to bear without any fear into the presence of God too, but imagine how that turned into how they treated one another. And we see it throughout the New Testament, that the early church was a place of unbelievable grace and mercy and compassion and love and forgiveness and restoration. The church of Jesus Christ should be the most authentic, honest, safe, forgiving, loving, freeing, empowering, unleashing place on the planet of Earth. Sometimes I wonder, should the early church leaders show up today and see what has become in so many places the judgmental replication of Jesus in the church, if they'd even recognize it? Or if they would, and they would call it what they did then. The Sadducees, the Pharisees, Sanhedrin. I wonder for you and I, where might you have embraced an inaccurate picture of who Jesus is? And living out of that? Where might you be communicating an inaccurate picture of who Jesus is? And maybe you don't even know. Maybe that's the question or the questions you need to sit in right now and ask God to bring some clarity. But I know this. I want so desperately to know the real Jesus. Not the version I create in my own mind. Not the version that other people have created for me. But him. And I want to portray the real Jesus. And I know I've not always had the right image of who Jesus is in my mind. And I know I've not always portrayed the right image of Jesus. I know that sometimes the image I have believed and I have portrayed is this one, found wanting. But what if we could replace that message? Not you have been weighed, you have been measured, you've been found wanting, but what if it's you have been found lovable, you have been found beautiful, you have been found redeemed. You have been found forgiven. You have been found as mine. We're going to end this morning with communion. And there's possibly no better place to get a picture of the reality that that is God's message through Jesus to us. Some people like to believe and have said that God loved us after the death on the cross. And yet we're told in the simplistic of verses in John 3:16, for God so what? Loved the world that he gave. Love preceded the giving. He is so wild about you. And if there is any other message in your head that leans more towards that one, it's wrong, it's vile, and it's from the pits of hell. You are loved with an everlasting love by a God who says, bring your full self to bear in my presence, and who longs for us to create a community that does the same. So as we take communion this morning, here's how we'll do it. There's stations set up around the room. And during this last song, as it feels right and appropriate for you, I would just encourage you to go, and maybe you take it there in a moment with somebody else, or maybe you come back to your seat. But the next few moments are to sit in the reality that you are precious to him.
a friend knows a secret, like a heart knows the reason. Oh, I wanna know you for who you really are, like the clay knows the potter, like a son knows their father. Oh, I wanna know you for who you really are. I wanna know you. I wanna know you. I wanna know you for who you really are. I wanna know you. I wanna know you. I wanna know you for who you really
Does anybody ever have, when Matthias will sometimes sing like that? Come here. And like you kind of take us off of the song and there's just lyrics and you're like, did they forget the lyrics or what was that? So listen, here's what's kind of neat about moments like that. Like, could you imagine if all I ever did was use the script when I spoke? The whole time it's like, and then in the book of Pete, like, not that that's how you sing, but music is it's the script. But instead, there are times like there's thoughts that I have in the moment that I never thought of before the moment I'm standing up here. And I'm just like, oh, I should say this. And I feel like those are literally moments where God just says, say this, do this. And he just led in a moment. That's what that is with music, is it's a moment like that. And I'm thankful that there's moments that we have the opportunity to hear Matthias hear something from God that he wants to say to us. So in moments like that for me, I'm like, there's no lyrics. Okay, I'm just gonna listen because God is kind of saying something to us through him in a similar way that I don't always follow an exact script when I speak. So anyways, just for those of us that are like, hey, what happened to the lyrics didn't show up? That's what those moments are. So thank you. Hey, a couple of things really quick as you're walking out. One, we have baptism coming up in the month of May, and would love if you have not been baptized yet to encourage you to start thinking about that and moving that direction. Baptism is such a powerful moment because it is not the moment where you're saying, I've got it all together, I've got it all figured out, all my ducks are in a row. It's a moment where you're saying the exact opposite. I don't have it all together, I don't have it all figured out, but I'm safe in the hands of Jesus. I believe there is a God. His name is Jesus. He's wild about me. And so when that song says, I want more of you, it's the embracing belief that he wants more of you. And so if you've not made that decision, if you've not taken that step, man, those are some of the best days at Kensington. So I hope that you'll join us for that. There's where you can sign up or you can talk to people at the hub. Last thing, if you've got kids in K-Kids, every event we do in K-Kids is always stellar and amazing. We've got an Easter egg hunt coming up. Again, here's all the ways to sign up for that, but you're gonna wanna be a part of that if you got kids. Everything they do is stellar. It's gonna be a fun time. So now you know, so bring your kids, bring your friends, be a part of that. Grab a Easter flyer on the way out and continue to make sure in the next couple of weeks you're asking God who needs to get that invite as we celebrate that our God is risen. Thanks for being with us this morning. Have a great rest of the week. We'll see you next Sunday.